Is this okay? Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I can see.
We're in business.
Okay. So yeah, we're in business, as they say. Thank you for everyone who attended. We hope that we add value and for everyone. This is our objective of this webinar is to discuss the return of the employee to work gradually with the return of customers to business at the same time, gradually in what's coming. We would like to highlight an advice that any advice provided may not be suitable to be implemented because each company has its own culture, has its own environment, from government to private sector. This is only an advice specific for business awareness from our side as a partnership between us and Connecticut, which is Mr. Joey as the consultant. Questions and answers at the end with the presentation as we did previously. A brief about Joey from my side. He's one of the mentors that I've worked with. He have supported Businessway and me personally for a bunch of years to get through a lot of projects which are related to customer experience, business growth. We have worked with international companies here in Saudi and even private sectors. Joey, if you would like to add from your side anything for yourself?
No, other than, you know, we hope that some of these webinars that we're doing do help some businesses and some government people to get back and respond to this horrible event.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Let's start with the first question. The first questions which came to mind when we discussed previously. What are the key employee considerations when returning to work after COVID-19 lockdown? Now, there was a lockdown, and I hope gradually now this lockdown is smoothly opening. Employees will start, companies will start requesting employees to come back. What is the employee experience that you recommend, and how do we treat that?
Yeah, and I think before I answer the employee considerations question, I think it's important to put everyone on the same page, the ways to effectively respond to COVID-19. So I think by now most of us know what these things are, but I think it's good to revisit them so that everyone's on the same page as to what are the key things to effectively respond to COVID-19. So look at these key points. The fundamentals to responding to COVID-19, I think the first one is about social distancing. And different governments have come out with different dimensions, but it's approximately between 1.5 to 2 meters apart is the key one. So social distancing is the first key thing that I think universally has been accepted as a way of responding to not catching COVID-19. Second one, masks, and we've heard different countries come out with their views on masks, but I think some of those views about masks have been designed to make sure that the supply of masks to health workers were not compromised. But we do know that protecting the face with a surgical type mask is definitely one of the primary ways to not catch COVID-19 and protect people from catching COVID-19. The second one is gloves. So gloves are designed to protect people touching surfaces that may be infected and then reinfecting themselves, so touching their face. So gloves, whether it's surgical gloves or rubber gloves of some sort, is a good way to ensure that people are not being careless in the way that they touch their face and get infected.
Yes.
Then there's the sanitization of physical areas, and the sanitization is largely around metal and glass objects where we know that the virus can live for an extended period of time. So that's an important part, is to ensure that the physical areas where people are most likely to interact with are properly sanitized on a regular basis. And then there's the quarantine of the sick or potentially sick. So isolating people who we know have COVID-19 is being a major way of responding to this illness, or potentially people who are sick. So so those who are showing signs of being unwell, or may have come into contact with people who are ill, should be quarantined. And so, we know that, travelers have had 14 days mandatory quarantine periods. So that's another key way of responding. The next one is regular hand washing for 20 seconds or more. We know that that's important to have regular hand washing. The 20 seconds or more is designed to ensure that it's properly cleansed from your hands using just basic soap and water, running water. Yeah. And the last one is really one of the most important ones, which is contacting people who have tested positive and understanding who they may have come in contact with. So this is known as trace tracking, and trace tracking has been one of the most effective ways we have seen countries address the prevention of further spread of COVID-19 within the community. Because by isolating or contacting these people very quickly and then getting those people tested can actually help the further spread of COVID-19 within the community. And we'll talk a little bit more about trace tracking, but in places like here in Australia, government has almost, hasn't made it mandatory, but they've basically put out a trace tracking application, and have mentioned to people that that unless a certain number of people download them and activate the trace tracking application, then certain parts of the economy would not open up. So trace tracking has been one of the most effective ways of ensuring the further spread of COVID-19. All right.
Yeah, the same thing here in Saudi. We found that the Ministry of Health was very aggressive about it, and they have took the extra mile, which is by doing as they say, a mass checkup on the gathering areas for for the laborers areas, and the companies and corporates especially, or any which are there are a number of big gathering occupations, and that was really a very good approach they did. Okay, it was scary because you saw the peak, it jumped. The numbers just started jumping from hundreds to 1,000, 1,200, but it really supported that to know where is the area, and they are really monitoring 100%, as you say, the trace tracking of each infected, and they see from where it came. So, and they close it immediately.
Yeah, and I think look, we're going to hear a lot more about it, but this is technology is playing a big role in making sure that the tracking of people that may have been in contact with is as effective and efficient as possible. Okay, so when we talk about employee considerations, I want to talk about three main areas. There's the physical work environment, is one of the first areas of consideration that you need to take into account. The second one is employee health and well-being, and employee customer interaction practices. So they're the three main areas that you need to take into consideration when managing employees and their return back to work. So let's have a look at the first one, which is the work environment. The first one is the physical workspace. So some of you have offices, some of you have shops. It's about understanding the physical workspace and how you're going to seat people, understanding the limitations you have around physical space, how you're going to manage social distancing, and how you're going to make sure that you're going to have the right types of signage for employees as they return back to work. The second one is meeting rooms. So a lot of you have meeting rooms. And I think the important thing about meeting rooms is that you need to be able to determine the number of employees that actually could be in a physical meeting room. And the simple math is allow for 3 meters squared per employee. So if you have a 10 square meter room, then that really limits the number of people that could be in that room down to 3 people. Work out with every meeting room the maximum number of people, and make it easy for people, for your employees, to know how many people to be in there, so they're not violating any social distancing rules by placing the maximum number of employees that could be in that meeting room on each meeting room. So people know exactly how many people could be in that one room at any one time. Second one is your customer counters. So those of you who have customer counters, work out how you're going to make it safe for employees to interact with customers at the counter level. The next one is the ratio of staff to safe physical space. So as mentioned, there is a limit to the number of people that can be in any one of, at any point in time. Work out what your work environment is like in terms of physical space and the maximum number of employees that could be there. Now, some of you may have call centers where with those call centers, you have to reduce the number of employees because you'll be breaching physical safety ratios. And then work out what you need to do with those employees who cannot be in that one space at any point in time. So the ratio of staff to safe physical space is an important one. Hygiene signage. You need to make sure that there's hygiene signage for your employees, and it is clear what are the expectations for those employees when they're at the place of work. Daily sanitization, so make sure that you address daily sanitization of the physical work environment, and formalize a remote working policy for percentage of staff. So a lot of us have now become used to working remotely, working from home, and for those of you who don't have the physical space to spread your employees around, try and formalize a working remotely policy to ensure that a percentage of your staff can in fact work remotely. So you may want to consider not bringing everybody back, but actually allocating a percentage of staff to remain at their place of home, and possibly even rotating those employees as well, so that they can get social interaction, they can come into work. So to be able to put a roster in place where people can work at home, work in the office, and ensure that ratio of staff to safe physical space is actually maintained at all times. Okay, when we talk about employee health and well-being, I think it's important to consider something along the lines of some sort of formal communication to employees. In that employees returning to the workplace, that as an employer, you have a duty of care to ensure their safety, but it's important to highlight that there is no guarantee of safety to your employees. Now, I mentioned that to limit any potential liabilities that may come down the track. So we're starting to hear people taking out legal action because there wasn't a duty of care taken by certain organizations. It's important to try and protect you as an employer from any potential liability by making it very clear to your employees that you will do everything that is possible, but there is no 100% guarantee of safety. And there is, in fact, a way that you can do that by making sure that staff accept the terms of returning to work. So consider the staff acknowledging that there is no guarantee of safety, but also accepting that they have a role to play in making sure that their colleagues are kept safe and the work environment is kept safe as well. So this is a collaboration that needs to happen between employer and employee, where there is an acknowledgement that they have a role to play in making sure that the well-being and safety of themselves and their colleagues. Education and training. So it's important to educate and train employees about what they need to do to make sure that they are safe in the workplace. I think it's important not to assume that every employee understands what they need to do. And so those fundamental things like wearing gloves, masks, washing regularly, social distancing, not being in meeting rooms, and breaching physical space restrictions, all of these things are really important. Lunchroom areas. All of these things need to be thought about and properly. You need to educate people, your employees, and make sure that they understand what they need to do. I think you need to implement a zero tolerance policy if people are symptomatic. So what I mean by that is that unfortunately now, people who have something as simple as the common cold, you may want to make sure that they do not come to work and they don't pretend or act like they're trying to do a service by coming to work when they've got a little bit of a cold. I think it's important to have a zero tolerance that if you're showing any signs of not being well, even down to the minimum, as a cold, please stay home. Do not come into work. So you need to enforce that strong zero tolerance policy if people are symptomatic. You don't want to take any risks. You want to make sure that employees do not come into work. So we've heard lots and lots of examples where nurses have come in, or not nurses, aged care workers have come in, weren't feeling well, and have come in, have tested positive, and then have infected a number of residents at an aged care facility. And unfortunately, that's not going to turn out very well for the employer who didn't take that duty of care with their employees. Okay, the next one is employee customer interaction practices. Sorry, the last point I wanted to mention was mental health. Yes, it's important to make sure that your employees that you're taking care of their mental health and providing them with as much support as possible. Okay, so with the employee customer interactions, you want to re-engineer any customer interaction processes and practices. So think about how your employees are currently interacting with customers, and if there's a physical touch interaction, you need to re-engineer that so it's zero touch or it's a very light touch. So you want to consider those, and we're going to talk about customer interaction points, processes in a little while as well. And you want to train and upskill, of course, employees on these new practices, and make sure that they're trained on customer empathy. So customer empathy is one of those things that we are focusing on, because as your customers return, remember that they might be concerned about being at your place of business. They're probably stressed that they have to be there to do business, and to make sure that your staff are aware that that interaction they're having with customers is a little bit different now with COVID-19, and making sure that the customers are they're responding to customers in a very empathetic way. Okay.
Joey, just a point here, Yani, thank you for highlighting all of these points. But I think so, Yani, what we can see that there will be a big opportunity for technology to take place of a lot of Yani, areas of touch points, as you said, for the employee, to support companies improve the communication, like in the meeting rooms. I think so the conference calls and all of that will be handled to minimize the gathering in any meeting room if needed. And also I think so the most risk that will be delayed, especially in the construction or manufacturing and all of that, which it needs a huge number of people to really build a building, or because there is not a big technology until now that can finalize that in as they say, in a minimum time. You need people to do that, and these people need to be close to each other. So it's like a ladder. They just, each one completes the other. So yeah, this time and this era, I think so we are going to see a lot of change, which technology will be embedded to change a lot of ways that business used to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think consider simple things like a lot of employers have fingerprint recognition for attendance, right? So they have their employees using fingerprint for recognition, but that now needs to change.
Yeah.
But even that technology, because every time if you got more and more people using the fingerprint, then that's an area for infection, right? For
right.
So you need to reconsider simple things like technologies that you may be using that are not now as effective in your daily work practices. Okay.
The second question is, what is the most effective and efficient approach to address these employees' issues?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I think there's it's important to note that there are many aspects to answering this question. And I think the best way to address the most important approaches in addressing these employee issues is to cover it off in three main areas. So what I'm going to do is cover off the first one, which is the team. What team should you have to be able to make these decisions? Secondly, I want to provide a framework for designing the solutions themselves. And then lastly, I'm going to highlight the key considerations you should include to ensure your return to work is as effective as possible. So let's start off with the first one, which is so one of the things that we're recommending is that you have a cross-functional team members. So the people that you should have to address the employee issues is, of course, the human resources director, and that's the person who's really should be leading a lot of these employee type issues. Legal advisor, because one of the things that we're recommending again is you don't want liability issues at the place of work. And I know I know it's going to happen. We're starting to see it happen. People talking about litigation and stuff like that now. But try and prevent that as much as possible by making sure that you have a legal advisor to help in that decision-making process. A medical advisor, someone to validate the actions that you are taking are in fact the proper ones to protect employees at the place of work. Of course, the CEO is important to be there. All decision-making needs to be ratified by the CEO. Customer experience director. And for those of you who don't have a customer experience director, try and find the closest thing to it, but that person should be involved in this decision-making process, because when we're talking about employee and customer interaction processes and redesigning those, that person should have the best insights in making some of those decisions around how you should re-engineer. And customer operations director, of course, that person is important to make sure that they can execute on a lot of the operational aspects of what employees have to now do. Okay. Now, when you've got that team together, this cross-functional team, you're in the solution design business. And I really wanted to focus on the fact that you are designing a solution on two key levels. The first one is you're going to do what the government has prescribed as your minimum requirements, mandated by law or by guidelines or whatever. So that's the first level, is that you must meet that minimum government requirements. And every country's got different requirements, but you need to know what those government prescribed requirements are for you to reopen your business. And then the second one is really at the level of your brand and your identity and value. So this is about how you're going to take the minimum levels and project them in a way that reflects your brand and your values. And I'm going to give you some examples of that a little bit later on. But a lot of organizations, they may want to go above and beyond the minimum government requirements that have been laid down for return to work. And making sure that their brand values are reflected in a way that communicates to their customers who they are, and that they are in fact looking after their best interests according to their brand values. Okay. And to be as effective as possible, you need to address a number of key points, which are resources, capital, and supply. So first one is making sure that you may need new resources, and they may be required to undertake new responsibilities. And these responsibilities could be like ensuring that employees are safe and fit to come to work, that employees working remotely are well taken care of. So you might allocate people these new responsibilities. Consider...
You mean by that, Joey, you mean by that employees are, like an example, all the connections and all of that are active and they have the license and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So making sure that employees are well taken care of, that they can perform their job, but also employees to make sure that there is compliance in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So the only way you're going to be able to do that is to make sure that you have someone walking around, ensure that there's not to be like a police officer, but to help make sure that they're consciously making the right decisions in the workplace. The other thing that you'll need is, it's likely that you'll need some capital to procure services and materials. So as mentioned, there's going to be things like, simple things like sanitization, equipment. You might need to have a way to measure people's temperature, so you'll need new equipment for that. So you might need some capital to procure those items to be able to reopen. Determine the most efficient supply partners that you need for these goods and services. So you need this equipment quickly, and every person needs to utilize their procurement people to try and get these things as quick as possible. And the last one is for the return to work, treat it like a project and project manage the entire return using project management fundamentals and best practices. And I think that's the best way that you can coordinate it properly, do it in a structured and methodical way, is to put it on a project plan, allocate tasks to people, and tick off those tasks as they're being done. Ensure that you're addressing all the critical points to effectively get the employees returning back to work. Is that all right? So I think I've covered that. Waleed, is there any questions you might have at this point?
No, I'm very grateful that you have highlighted the project manager or project management to return back to work, because what's happening now, you thrown to the either the head of the department to be responsible, and they tell him, okay, do it. An example for the customer service, I want your call center to be active, do it. Poorly and sadly, he has already been overloaded. He needs somebody to support him to ensure that initiatives are correctly done. So highlighting the project management or project manager that supports of the full organization and reporting to the CEO, showing that how this is going on track and ensuring that this is going correctly is a very crucial point, because I saw it. Yani people, when they move to working from home, they face the problem. I have an issue here. I don't have license to this. I don't have. Why? Because it was not correctly projected that these steps need to be done.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. What the third question? What are the key customer considerations when returning to work after the COVID-19 lockdown? Now, companies are. Our organizations will be returning back to work. There will be, as we spoke in our previous webinar, customer emotionally and mentally will be different. The treatment will be different. So how can we do that?
Yeah, so I think the customer considerations are very similar to employee ones, but with a few key differences. So let's have a look at these key customer considerations. The customer considerations fall under, again, three main areas. One is the interaction environment. So how they're interacting with the place of business is the first one. The customer health and well-being, like the employee health and well-being. And then the customer journey design. So customer journey design is something which is a little bit different when we're talking about customers. So let's start off with the interaction environment. The first one is the waiting area. So consider, if you have a waiting area for your business, consider that and how you're going to manage the waiting area where customers are coming in to undertake business at your place of work. The second one is customer counters, as mentioned before. When customers come up, are you going to have perspex glass to protect? What types of signs are you going to have? How are you going to get people to wait in a queue before they come up to the counter? Consider all of those things, and they need to be addressed. So walk through flow. Now, what I mean by that is in certain places, customers can interact in both ways. They're coming in, they're coming out. They can go down aisles in both directions. What some places have done is realize that that's actually not effective for managing social distancing. So they've created a certain flow for how people move and created one-way traffic so that it only flows in a certain direction, and that people are unlikely to come into direct contact because they're facing each other. So if you manage the flow so they go in a one-way direction, that could actually help in the social distancing as well. And we've seen lots of examples of that. Self-service machines. Okay, so that's great that you have self-service machines, but every time someone pushes that button on that screen, who's going to sanitize it? And because, you know, that's another area of potential infection. So even though you might have self-service machines, it doesn't mean that it's the safe option, because people are touching those digital screens, and those digital screens then need to be somehow sanitized. The ratio of customer to safe physical space, we've talked about that with the employees, but how many customers can you have in the one physical location? You need to know what your physical space is and limit the number that could be in your place of work, in your store, or your branch. That's really important. Hygiene signage, so you need to have physical signage, explaining to customers, you know, what they must do, what are the rules for entering your place of business, and making sure that they're adhering to that as well. And daily sanitization, as mentioned in the work environment, is of absolute importance. Again, that goes without saying for employees and for customers as well. So for customer health and well-being, of course, the hand sanitizers, as soon as they enter the place of business, needs to be there. Automated hand sanitizers are probably the best one, because that's almost zero touch. Gloves or masks, you know, consider that some customers may not have gloves or masks, but as a business, are you going to provide them to customers? Or are you going to make it mandatory for them to wear gloves and masks? So consider the fact that you know, you want to continue serving customers even though they may not have gloves or masks. Counter shields, we've talked about making sure that there's shields at the place of at the counter. Tracing applications, are you going to implement, make sure that for anyone to enter a place of business that they have a tracing application installed on their phone? You might make that a mandatory condition of people entering the place of work. Compliance monitoring. You know, who's going to do that monitoring to make sure that customers in the place of business are actually complying to the rules and conditions of that you set for your place of business? So having people walking around, making sure that customers are complying to the health and well-being guidelines and rules that you've set, I think is important as well. Age restrictions. So I know that some places are now saying, you know, if you're over 60, you cannot come to, you know, the shopping mall or whatever. Are you going to restrict the people of a certain age bracket not to come into your place of work? And the other converse to that is maybe those people who are vulnerable, like the over 60s, you create exclusive hours for them, right? So we've seen that happen effectively in places here where they've said people over 60 can shop between the hours of 7 and 8:30 a.m. in the morning, and that no one else can enter the store except people who are seniors. So consider putting in exclusive hours for your seniors. When it comes to designing, and the last one is pay by card. So I know the Middle East is very focused on cash, but you know, tapping by card has to be the preferred option. And you may want to educate your customers that paying by card is the preferred option. And so in some places, they will not accept cash because of the handling of money and the higher risk related to transmission of COVID-19.
just one point here. Now here there is a rule in the government that everything is paid through cards or transferred through, as they say, money transfer. Cash is one, yani you could say 20% of the money rotation in the government now in the country. 80% is more fintech and more automated cash, which is electronic cash here in Saudi. Even when you order from any delivery company, they will not accept cash. You have to pay it online. So yes, we are there here, as I told you, in the country, they are really restricting that totally.
And that's good to see, because you know, handling cash is one of the biggest ways that you can pass on you know, disease essentially. Let's talk about the customer journey. So the first thing is that you need to review, you know, what's happening emotionally and what your customers are thinking about at each particular touch point. You need to revisit your customer journey maps and look at what the customer journey now looks like. What are they likely to think at each particular touch point, and how you're going to address that to alleviate any emotional anxiety they may have, and make sure you satisfy their desire to get the information that they're looking for at any particular touch point as well. You need to consider your branding at each particular touch point and how that's going to be reflected at each particular touch point now after you re-engineered the customer journey. Look at modifying offers and services. So one of the things that disappoints me with a couple of companies is that they're still advertising like nothing has changed. And I really frustrates me, because the world has changed, and they're not responding in a way that addresses the fact that the world has changed, and they're not modifying their offers in a way that is responding to those changes. So modify your offers and your services to reflect the new environment. Coordinate your experience. So one of the things that it's important is that if you have branches all over the country or in different countries, that your efforts are coordinated so that the journey that you create for your customers is consistent, and it's consistent across channels as well. So that's really important, is that you not only have to look at it from different parts of the country or different countries, but you also need to make sure that your various channels are producing a reasonably coordinated experience for your customers. And the last one is communications, and I wanted to highlight that in the next section, give you an example of some ways that companies are communicating and the differences in how they reflect their brand. So, so this one is, you know, is about your signage and how that will reflect your brand. And the best way to highlight the communication of this is to give you some examples. So the first one is this one. So this is a chemist, and it's in red, and it's got a big stop sign. Do not enter, and that is maybe appropriate for you know, a doctor's office, but it's certainly not appropriate for a different type of business like a bank or a retail store selling you know, children's clothing or whatever. So that sign is very different. It's very forceful. It's very specific. So this one is a second sign, which is from a bank.
Yeah.
Again, very very brand specific, very controlled, very much toned down, not like the first sign, but very much reflecting the brand's values of that bank. And the third one is completely different, which is stay calm, stay safe, we love you. And that's at a supermarket. I think it's coming out of Waitrose. but it's a very different type of messaging. But you could see very clearly that the communication and the signage is very different with each particular type of business that that is being reflected here.
Going back to what you have said in the last webinar, which is the empathy. The empathy with the customers here is very crucial.
Absolutely, and it's important. So the first one, you know, the red one really highlights a very high energy. There's nothing calming about that one. It's very like alarmist. And then the stay calm, stay safe one is completely the opposite, where it's telling people to, it's okay, we'll be back, come strong, all that sort of stuff. Very different types of communications. I took these ones from my local supermarket, which is Woolworths. And I just wanted to highlight it because the supermarkets some have provided the best examples of how quick they've adapted to the new environment. And in this supermarket, they've addressed the points that we were raising in previous webinars, which is limiting customer numbers in stores. Now that's a really important one, and that should be adhered to. And there's examples of the types of signs that they've put out, and the social distancing within the store. So again, explaining the fact to keep 1.5 meters apart, pay by card. When you're waiting at the queue, wait 1.5 meters, and wash your hands and sanitize before you come into the store for the mandated 20 seconds. Okay, what I wanted to do was quickly show a 1-minute video from someone who I'd give a gold star for the way that they've responded to this, which is Emirates Airline. Watch the video and have a look at what they've done. Yeah, I just wanted to show this video on Emirates, because Emirates has gone above and beyond to make sure that their brand is reflected, that they give their customers that peace of mind. They went above and beyond to give to really, you know, not put any traveler in some sort of anxiety about traveling with the airline. Right, should we keep moving on?
Yeah, sure. What's the most effective and efficient approach to address these customer issues?
Yeah, so I think like the employee model that I gave before, about having a cross-functional team, but instead of having it led by HR leadership, we're saying it should be led by a corporate customer team. So if you look at the team members that we've got allocated here, we're saying that you should have a corporate customer experience team involved in the decision making here. Sales and marketing director, if you have one. Commercial director, if you have one. Operations person, your corporate and investor in communication. So because there's a lot of communications that need to happen with customers, whoever's in charge of customer communications or corporate communications definitely needs to be there to help craft the communications in the way that we've recommended it should be done. The CEO, of course, legal advisor should be on that team, and of course a medical advisor as well, to make sure that whatever solutions you come up with, they're in fact meeting the proper requirements set by the government, at least the minimum requirements.
But you're saying it need to be led by a corporate customer experience guy, or basically the customer experience head. Am I correct for this committee?
Yeah, absolutely. And for some companies, we know that they don't have a customer experience person. Try and find the second best thing, that of person who knows about customer experience. In some cases, you may need to pull in a consultant. You need to get someone who knows this space well enough to be able to advise you on what solutions to put forward. So the next one is to really about to say, you know, how do we accelerate this process? And what we're suggesting is that involve external consultants who have customer experience expertise if you don't have it in-house. So if you don't have in-house customer experience people, do involve external people to help you. The second one is, look, leverage from practices of other countries that have worked. Lots of things have worked in around the world. It's, you know, shortcut the process and do some research and find out what's worked and what hasn't, and you know, maybe copy some of those and make sure that they're reflective of your particular brand. The next one is, if you have multiple country operations, then you might want to decentralize the process. And the reason I'm saying that is that you think about it, if you have operations in different countries, there's going to be different rules, right? And so it's important to acknowledge that and decentralize the process, but at least give the country managers some guidelines about what they need to do and how to go about doing it. The last one is, you know, don't over analyze. That's really important, is don't get paralyzed. Act now. You may not get it perfect, but make future iterations. So do it, get people back to work, and then as you're back to work, make those adjustments as you see fit. And we saw a lot of the supermarkets do that, where they introduced certain practices and they modified it on a weekly, daily basis until they've achieved what we have today. Okay, last thing is, I want to highlight some important reminders for people who are working on the customer aspect of returning to work, is that the risks of the virus, I think, will remain in the community for at least 18 months. So this isn't going, you know, don't think that going back to work means that it's back to business as usual. This is going to last at least 18 to 24 months. Ensure you have a contactless or light touch or customer interaction processes. That keyword is contactless or as light as possible in terms of touch. Follow the government guidelines and laws of every particular country. And remember, you're designing on two levels, the government minimum and your brand levels. Communication to customers is critical. So educate them as much as possible. Make sure that you have signage around at your place of business to make sure that customers are aware of the new practices. Stay true to your brand values. It's important that you remain true to your brand values and that you do reflect what you stand for as a brand. And customers will need special offers to be enticed into spending again. Don't think that you can go about just promoting the same things that you have been always. They do need some incentives to come to spend again at your place of business. And expect to modify your customer experience as guidelines change. So this is an evolving thing. and expect that what you do today will need to change tomorrow. And that you need to make sure that you're constantly aware of the guidelines as they change and what the government mandates, and you will need to make those adjustments accordingly. The last one is one that I wanted to highlight. It's a really important one, and unfortunately is not good news. But we've heard about waves 2 and 3, and that they are a real possibility when it comes to COVID-19. And unfortunately, waves 2 and 3 for these types of pandemics have in fact been more severe than the first wave. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I know it's not a very good piece of news, but it is in fact a fact that we need to be aware of and to consider when we're getting people back to work, and that you may have to do even things more severe than what you did the first time around if a second or third wave comes.
Okay. Can you provide some examples of some organizations that are adapting well to all of what's happening in the environment now and this new environment? Yeah, everything is changing. Communicating to customers is totally different. Enhancing new rules, every week there is a rule from a government that restricts, approve, and do that. So customer expecting an example. For the past, an example, 1 month, we were facing here in Saudi a big issue in delivery. Why? Because everything was changing. New rules, new restrictions, new letters, new license, all of that, until it gets stabled. Then another rule came. So which are of the companies or organizations that you see have adopted easily?
Yeah.
And they are doing it in a good way.
Yeah, I think there's lots of companies and governments that are adapting really, really well. And I'm going to just share with you a small sample. This is our last slide, so I'm conscious of time. We're almost out of time.
Yeah.
We'll have some questions in a second. But so the ones that I would, and again, I've just put down ones that that I'm familiar with, which is, so Emirates Airlines, I think, has done really well. A supermarket, which is Woolworths here in Australia, has done extremely well at adapting. We've seen McDonald's and Domino's in the fast food adapt really well with their contactless approach, sealing bags, giving people all that comfort that they can still get their food in a way that's completely safe. Myer is a retail store in Australia, which is largely a bricks and mortar retail store that completely shut their stores, but adjusted their online store so that they could have a lower threshold for free delivery. They relaxed their return policies, which is important. They relaxed their return policies to give people comfort that if they buy and return something, they're not going to be restricted in not being able to return it. And then they've also introduced a pickup service where you can buy online, but then go pick it up at a physical store and have someone deliver it to you. So they've adjusted really well. And lastly, the government of Dubai have done really well, but they've been focusing on a digital government and digital services for some time. So they've been promoting their 24/7 access to government services for citizens through their online apps. And that's really it. I think we've run out of time, so we can open it up for some questions and answers. You've got the Q&A area, so if you want to ask us some questions, you may do so now. While people are asking questions, I wanted to just highlight that on our website we have a COVID-19 page with all of the recordings of the webinar and some papers. And you could also access them on YouTube. And I know Walid's doing something as well along those lines.
Yes.
So any questions that anyone has, please ask now if you have any.
Okay, until we have a question, I just have a small point. would like to discuss with you. Going back to the journey mapping, because it's something I'm sure that a lot of people are suffering here in Saudi, and or organizations, either government or non-government, to build and ensure having a better journey map with what's happening now. Also, I'm sure that all of this builds on to ensure that you have a correct strategy for a voice of customer. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that so crucial that the point of journey mapping, each touch point and how it adjusts and it links to the voice of customer?
Well, I think I mean the voice of customer is important regardless. You know, before this or this, it will still remain very important. I think it's critical now more than ever to understand what your customers are feeling, what their experience is likely to be post-COVID-19. So if you don't know what those customer journeys are, and you don't know how you're impacting your customers today in a post-COVID-19 world, then I think you're going to be in a very vulnerable position. And, you know, for those companies who are more sophisticated in their customer journey mapping, they're likely to acquire new customers for those who are a little bit careless in their approach, because, you know, this is a high emotion environment that we're in, and customers are likely to feel the impact a lot more than before. And, you know, they're likely to switch brands a lot faster than ever before.
You're right.
That's why we're saying, you know, look at your journey maps, look at what your customers are feeling, because, you know, customers will not hesitate now to move if they feel insecure, they feel like you're compromising their safety. So yeah, that's why it's really important to understand what customers are saying and what they're feeling, and making sure you have a good grasp about what that journey looks like.
And I'm sure that previously any organization had the chance to fix everything, or before it escalated to be on the social platform. Now, the only communication between any organization or any company is the social platform, which is either social networking or even email. So God help everyone, and because honestly, a small attraction or a small impact, now I think so what's happening is, previously they say one bad experience implicates to about 10 or 12. Now I think so it's hitting 30.
No, absolutely. So each impact point is more pronounced, it's more impactful. And so that's why it's really important, is that the impact of a badly managed touch point would have severe consequences on your customers and the way that they see your brand and the way that they want to do business or not do business with you.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. People are, I mean, we have, as they say, filled them with a lot of what we have discussed, and there is no questions here. So thank you. I think so we could close this and say thank you. I would like to thank you, Joey, for accepting our request and for attending a second webinar. I hope that we could manage to do a third one if there is a possibility. Thank you for everyone who attended. Please stay safe. God bless you all. Thank you, Joey. If you have anything to say.
No, thank you very much, Walid, and it's great to have participated in this second webinar that we've done with you guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.
Assalamu alaikum. Bye.